Okay, I think we can start. Fantastic. Well, welcome, colleagues and friends, to the third tranche of the 28 for 28 webinar series organized by the United Nations Office Resident Coordinator for the UAE. These webinars will take us through December 2023, the end of this year, touching on a variety of topics from biodiversity and water to climate diplomacy. We went to great lengths to ensure that we deliver quality presentations with colleagues from across the United Nations system and also from partners. So please spread the word about these webinars and stay with us every Wednesday at 2 p.m. UAE time for a meaningful conversation on the road to COP28 and beyond. Today's webinar is on the topic of climate change misinformation. Combating climate change is not just about science and policy, but it is also about shaping our understanding and what are some meaningful actions. How can we detect greenwashing, but also standing in the face of climate denial, unfortunately. As we start today's webinar, I invite you to put your questions in the chat so that we can address those questions later towards the end of the panel. And with that, allow me to hand over the floor to our colleague Banu Nupa, a senior expert on communications and information at UNESCO. Banu, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. Can I please share my slides?
Yes, go ahead. You have the authority.
All right. Is it visible now?
Yes, perfect. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much for that introduction. My name is Banu Nupa. I serve as an advisor for Universal Access to Information section at UNESCO's Communication and Information sector. And I primarily work in the area of open solution and the ICT and sciences, and primarily in the ICTF sciences, among many other topics that I deal with. I also work in the area of climate change disinformation. And it was very nice that some of the colleagues that I worked with earlier are also present in this webinar. Just to take you through what is disinformation, I'll simply start from there and provide a little bit of nomenclature on this particular term, take you across several things that are happening around the world, and also our assessment of what happened during COP27. So I would say that given the fact that the election in the US has started to come up, there will be another, major thrust on disinformation, primarily on a very, a very loose effort will start to deny climate change. Anyways, disinformation is a growing concern in the fight against climate change. This is nothing but a deliberate attempt to malign the impact of climate change, that is happening around the world, but at the same time, address that it is not at all a risk for the humanity. 97% of the scientists may think otherwise, but in fact, there are many people who think that, something that is happening and the rising temperature is nothing but part of a conspiracy theory that is happening around the world. Anyways, what I will do is I'll take you through that just to give you a little take on the key terms. Disinformation is, in fact, a false and deliberately created information primarily to harm a person, social group, organization, are a country, and in this case, a cause for the humanity. Misinformation is slightly different than that, which may be a false, falsehood that is created, but not primarily with the intention of causing harm. Malinformation is something that is based on reality, but something that inflicts harm on a person, social group, organization, or a country. If we look around in the domain of climate change, several things are happening. Primarily, this is being either to exaggerate the severity of this phenomena that is taking place around the world, essentially put a blame on a certain group or countries who are to be blamed for climate change. That's also another dimension that is taking place. But at the same time, this is primarily used to deny urgency to appreciate and act on climate change. I simply put, several newspaper clipping and the journal and the articles that have been published in many of these peer-reviewed journals, which kind of deny that climate change is actually happening. So why does climate change actually matters to us? First thing is it lowers acceptance of climate change. People think that climate change is nothing. It hinders, urgent effort to respond to climate change. Of course, in many cases, it sensationalizes and also spread panic. One of the things, that we have recently started to see that climate change, this disinformation is primarily also being spread to allow for disproportionate use of resources, primarily transboundary water resources, and especially river water, and how this can be utilized by two different countries. Disinformation primarily is taking place, and also to blame on the government's personal inefficiency to something else, primarily that okay, the water was not properly utilized by upstream country, or water was released, and that actually led to the flood, essentially to mask how climate change is increasing severity as well as frequency of different climate related events. So how it's done is the major question, and it's quite interestingly, as I mentioned in my introductory statement, that there are environmental organizations around which spend limited funds, grab about 97% of the scientists, and who have nothing else to do but they prepare like they fool around with the data, or present it differently to falsify scientific data. So this is something that is happening. Something that appears below in the screen is the time clipping that was published in 23 of August, immediately after U.S. Republican presidential debate. There was a major, one of the candidates had in fact come up with a major, say, statement against climate change, and it is definitely going to propagate as well as multiply in the days to come. So a few common narratives, that are being raised by the climate change deniers are that climate change is nothing but a hoax. This is something that a few scientists have come forward. The second thing, they basically attribute it to natural climate variability that happens from season to season, or from like a seasonal cycle to cycle, such as El Nino and La Nina. The other thing is, they also say that, some of the climate science, that is in place right now, this is full of uncertainty. So nothing can be said, for certainty that actually climate is changing. Many, as I already earlier said, it's primarily because of natural cycles. Some of them, you may have seen give statistics of, say, temperature of 1943, where they say that, oh, today it was the hotter day than in 2023. So 1943 was hotter. So where is climate change and so forth? Some of these things also come up. The other point, many people argue against the fact of climate models being unreliable, and also talk about climate change benefits. Many of the narratives that are raised is, oh, okay, if there is CO2 in the air, That means, plant consume that CO2 and the crop production will increase and so forth. The other debate, which is in fact, coming forward, and this was also forwarded by, some of the presidential candidate, that whether we should only talk about adaptation or, also talk about adaptation and mitigation. So there are several narratives, that are being developed around. Thus, we must, worry about primarily because it undermines the existence of impact of climate change. This is the first and the foremost. The second is it also talks about unequivocal human influence on climate change, that this is primarily happening because of human influence, and then if they would somehow retract from it, nothing will happen and so forth. But also it actually deters taking corresponding urgent action to deal with climate change. Many climate deniers are primarily misrepresenting scientific data, and primarily it's done by cherry picking, facts that if the weather takes a plunge, you may have seen that, some of the very senior, statesmen of different countries, essentially tweeting about, okay, this day is so cold that, where is climate change or something like that. Of course, it also leads to the erosion of trust in climate science, climate-focused institution, experts and solutions, that have come forward. And of course, the biggest problem that comes forward is it contravenes the scientific consensus on mitigation or adaptation. So our chief boss is extremely worried about this. So I like this in a tweet very much, or X very much, that he released on 23rd of March, that even if it is now facing a difficult truth that climate change is making our planet uninhabitable. But at the same time, this is the time to end the relentless and senseless war on nature. In fact, we picked up this, and we have, in fact, started to deconstruct the second sentence, that Mr. Guterres, put forward. And we primarily have started to say that, how can we bring several, say, demand as well as, supply side or the science-related issues to deal with the climate change disinformation that is coming around. So the key dimension is, the false information and climate change and its causes are differently interpreted, but the impact of disinformation on public opinion and policy making is obviously there. And one of the major culprit, or something that propagates this disinformation is, of course, social media as well as digital platform in disseminating this disinformation. So what I will essentially do is, we analyzed all the news clipping, that came out during COP27, and I will provide you the fact, what were our learning from the information shared during COPs. So one thing that we essentially found out is, and I think, I basically say this with no offense to any media challenge that maybe, present during the panel discussion today. No media and news channel are opaque of possible political pressure or direction. Some of the things, that are taking place in South Asia are obvious to this fact, but at the same time, you will see some of the things that are happening in Southeast Asia. A few countries, I will not name them, but some of these issues are happening. In the previous regime, Brazil, in fact, was a major when they actually presented or utilized new media and new channel primarily to go ahead and clear fell major part of Amazon rivers. And we also say that, no media outlets are free from some level of bias. And this is unfortunate, but it's true. But media also has to somehow survive, and they require resources to sustain themselves. Sadly, I'm saying this, but sometimes, some of these things, and then especially with oil companies, this thing becomes, extremely obvious that the media are somehow, influenced by something. So policing and editing, definitely happen. And users can easily be fed with, different messages. And primarily because, these days tweaking algorithms have become, very easy. So AI-led news are, in fact, coming forward. And if you actually train AI generated news, a little bit, you can, in fact, find reproduce the same message in 5 different languages in 20 different countries just with a click of a button. And we are, in fact, trying to address it, but it's something. I have to say it because, but money can buy your way out. President Trump won his election primarily by, like influencing the media. Bloomberg in the previously in New York, he actually spent $100 million, of which, 193 million went for media. And I put that, in the last, in the right hand right corner there. Probably because we actually have started to calculate for this projected spending of the Republican candidates in the U.S. is estimated to be around $11 billion in 2024. And given the fact that some of these people who will be spending money are climate denier, I think we would definitely will have to take a different, wear a different hat and start taking stock of how climate is actually changing. The other thing is availability of information and exposure of an information are two differently radical concepts. You can have information, but that information may not be the correct one because you can easily be blocked. And you may have heard about internet shutdown. That happens in different parts of the world. In some issues. And then and access to internet is the key, or is it? And because we also saw that, and in the recent internet shutdown in one country, that this shutdown didn't impact at all in mobilizing people to stage against the government. So of course, there is access to internet is the key, but sometimes it may not be. So even if a piece of information is available, it can easily be hidden from you. And I'm not a very big programmer, but even I can do it. So there are people who are far better, and they can in fact do it with a click of a button. So past research definitely happened. The other interesting thing is the Boolean search is can also make a difference. If you actually put in your Google search bar climate change disinformation, and then click the button, and it will give you a different set of result. And in the next one, if you say that climate hoax justified, you will find a different. So how you search is also depends on how this thing happens. We also, in fact, this search engine optimization is the key. And unless there are local content available, things may not look very good. For example, all of us are human beings, and then 50% of us actually rely on the result that appears on the first page of the Google search. So if the first page says something, we think that this is it. Only 0.7% of the end users actually click on the 7th page. So you can see that okay, if a good and verified information is available on the 13th page, that information may not be accessed by the people. And search engine optimization primarily depend on how much local content is available, and also depends on the popular majoritarian content. So if people have started to click, the level of search engine of that particular news item essentially goes up. So local content are essentially needed, but local people, or the people have something else to talk about, and I think they will definitely spend time more on talking about themselves rather than talking as if the climate change facts are happening. So alternative local contents are mostly can also be paid stuff. So if I want to say something about Paris, for example, and if I pay some of these operators, and then in fact with a click of a button, some of them can in fact tweet 10,000 times in one click. So some of these things can essentially change how the a particular data set may become available in Google or, get accessed by people. Just to take this forward, the strategic narrative is a phrase, which is derived from business, is extremely important. How do we create our caption? If the caption is very super, if we say that, okay, Hurricane Katrina killed 34 people, it will attract, more likes and views and whatnot. And if you say that, okay, many firefighters, well, just smart enough to save, 2,700 lives or something like that, it may not, attract similar level of information. I mean, like likes as well as like access. So in this disinformation primarily is of no difference. Mostly spread for gains. So many media kind of twist and somehow use the subject strategic narrative differently. There are some fact-checking tools, that are available, like Ethical Journalism Network, factcheck.org, truthforfiction.com, and Hoaxlayer, and so forth. And there's also a YouTube, tool that is available, but most of them have been declared not that effective. To give you a quick recap now, false information that is created deliberately to harm a person, social group, organization, country is something. And again, I say that, meat industry is not a polluter, but that was something, which went around in the social media for some time. The other narrative, which actually comes forward, our small countries are the real culprit of climate change, and big countries, as well as like the advanced countries, are doing quite a lot. We've got a separate, say, a PowerPoint presentation on that one. Perhaps someday we will definitely have an opportunity to take a look at that. So what UNESCO does in this one? UNESCO essentially does capacity building. So we train we build capacities for journalists as well as media professional. Media information literacy is a major program for us. We raise awareness of different stakeholder groups. We work with them. And finally, what we primarily have started to do is we have started a deliberate campaign to make climate data open. And openness of climate data is a major program for us. And given the fact that, artificial intelligence is also playing a major role, what we have started to do is, we recently launched a book called, Open Data, What Now? And in fact, some the links will be available. And one of my colleagues, who is attending the talk, perhaps, should share that with everyone. We have recently launched, some of these books, for people. There is a handbook of religion, journalism, education, and training, which primarily talks about, how to deal with, disinformation. But at the same time, it also says what are the steps, one can take to maneuver against fake news, being multiplied in social media as well as other news channel. And we also have this document also has some modules that journalists can utilize to train themselves in fact checking, as well as like to benefit from media information literacy. The other question, I think, which is very, very, very relevant for now is, can ICTs actually address in disinformation? Data-led disinformation, as it is happening, of course, like this is a major new tool that we have to our disposal, and then we can, in fact, utilize it. And given the fact that disinformation campaigns have become prevalent in the modern digital age, as a result of availability of information online, we can, in fact, address this, and of course, like utilize social media to our benefit, and also search engines to address disinformation. So open data, I think, I'm almost running out of my time. So this is another thing, that we have started to talk about. And of course, there is a new book, that we have just released. And we are in fact looking for candidate countries where this open data guidelines, something that we have developed can be piloted. So if you know of any country that is interested, we'll be more than happy to work with you. So another thing, that UNESCO does is, if you look at the World Summit on Information Society, there is action line C3 where it talks about, universal access to information and also on e-science. In both of these, we have in fact spoken about the climate change disinformation, and we will continue to do so. And of course, there is a whole climate education for sustainable development is a major, say, component for UNESCO that, in fact, we take. Some of these, new publication that we have come up with, which are there. Open data for AI, what now is the last one, where we see that given the fact that, many of these, programming and other things are being utilized, are utilizing artificial intelligence, and how the data can be properly trained and archived and so forth, for AI to give, better results. So this is also, so just to, again, of the final 2 slides, one, there are demand side solutions, that we have, and there is supply side solution that we have, and there is a science-based solution that we have. And if we churn all of these together, we in fact come up with, a framework to deal with climate change disinformation. And this is something that UNESCO has been using. So there are potential solutions, that are out there. And in fact, we are looking for partners to work on this area. We will, in fact, take this discussion also during COP28, given the fact that COP28 is looking at the stock taking. And we will primarily look at, to what extent data at the individual level is being shared and properly communicated to the whole world, because that is one of the issues which is extremely important for us to take a look at. So the epilogue is, can we work together? Yes, we can. Do we have resources to support initiative? As I said earlier, yes, we have seed funding available in the area of both climate change data and also for openness to fight disinformation. So how can we contact? Obviously, my email is there. So with this, I thank you so much. And back to you.
Well, thank you very much, Banu, for a very enriching presentation. I think we can take away a lot from this in terms of how do we understand the key elements of climate change and how do we understand what makes sense. And if I recall, at one point, Nietzsche said that sometimes the truth is the lie we all agree upon. So therefore, it's important to find the science, find the evidence, address our biases, and then take it forward. So perhaps now I can give the floor for our next speaker, Kathy Sill, who is the Senior Climate Campaign Manager at the Climate Action Against Disinformation Coalition. Kate, you have the floor.
Thank you. I'm going to share my slides. I hope. I am hoping that
You're on mute.
Oh,
sorry.
I'm muted. You can't hear me?
Yes, then we can hear you. Sorry about
that. Okay. All right. Then I hope this is going to work. Can you see my slide deck?
Yes, you can maximize it if you like.
Okay. Sorry about this. Okay. Are you seeing the right screen, the full screen display now? Or
yes,
are you seeing
perfect.
notes? Perfect.
Yes,
okay, great. Thank you, and sorry for the little technical hitch. Hi, good morning. My name is Kate Sell. I am part of the Climate Action Against Disinformation, but my institutional affiliation is with the Union of Concerned Scientists. So the Union of Concerned Scientists is a US-based NGO that works at the intersection of science and public policy on a range of issues, including climate change. And it's a real honor to be with you all today and to respond to Banu's excellent presentation. So I think Banu gave a great explanation of what disinformation is and how it operates and where. So I'm going to talk a little bit about ways that we're organizing ourselves against it. And UCS, along with more than 50 other organizations, are part of the Climate Action Against Disinformation Coalition. And so today I'm going to talk about we call it CAD for short. So I'm going to talk about who CAD are and what we do and why we do it and what you can do. And how we can help you as we work together to address climate mis and disinformation and the ways that it thwarts progress on climate action. So who are CAD? CAD is a growing and unprecedented global effort of over 50 organizations committed to addressing one of the largest barriers to climate action, misleading and false content that perpetuates false narratives on our environment and dilutes productive conversations on the climate. And each member group contributes to our efforts on the policy, communications, and research fronts to hold big tech accountable for their role in allowing climate mis and disinformation to spread on their platforms. The groups are based in Asia, Africa, Europe, and North and South America. And so what is it that CAD do? Everything that we do begins with research on the problem. And so we have an entire research unit and member organizations for whom research is the primary function. And from that, we derive our policy and regulatory demands. We also monitor elections and how disinformation and the intersection of climate and election disinformation work. We support frontline groups with capacity building and resources. We do rapid response when there's a particularly destructive narrative that is gaining traction. We provide support for public information. We do campaigns together, advertise, and we do media interviews and sort of share, depending on expertise, like who's going to talk to a specific reporter. And then we also work to create important counter narratives and inoculate the public. And I think this is a useful word as we are in year 3 of a pandemic globally. It's useful to think of inoculation, protecting ourselves in advance, because it works much better than fact checking after the disinformation is out there. And so why do we do it? I think Banu gave a really great explanation of why this is a problem. I'm just going to talk a little bit about how big of a problem is it. One of the things that CAD has been doing for the last couple of years is creating an intelligence unit that monitors the narratives around the COPs. And our findings have revealed that disinformation continually outperforms verified science online, even when that science is actively supported by platforms. For example, Facebook has a climate science center, but even when a fact is checked or a narrative is declared by the Climate Science Center to be false, the disinformation still outperforms the correction. It's also true that a mere handful of actors originate, amplify, and proliferate most of the climate mis and disinformation. And many of these people maintain, quote, verified status on social media despite repeated fact checking. And climate is increasingly framed alongside other mis and disinfo or extremist content, including in relation to racial justice, electoral integrity, public health, gender identity, and hate speech, in which we include Holocaust denial. And this is sort of similar to something that Banu said, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. These are some of the prevalent narratives that we found. So we do see that, quote, anti-woke messaging and conspiracy theories are eclipsing the popularity and reach of other narratives. We see that accounts are repeatedly fact-checked without any meaningful response from the platforms, even when that activity violates terms of service or community guidelines. And as Bonnie said, media outlets are key to the ecosystem of misinformation. And we are hoping, one of our hopes is that we can work with UNESCO and other partners to help train and prepare journalists for how disinformation can be spread on their outlets unless they're prepared and ready. And finally, that industry campaigns are increasingly posing as citizen-led groups. So they look like frontline or grassroots efforts, and they're increasingly industry front groups. To take just one platform, Twitter, now called X, new research from our member Abby Richards found that between December 2021 and July of 2022, there were an average of 30,000 climate denial posts per week. But after Elon Musk purchased the platform in July of 2022, that figure nearly tripled to 110,000 posts per week. And Abby's graph shows how particular narratives spike at particular moments, often in conjunction with climate-related events, such as the passage of major climate legislation in the United States or around the Conference of the Parties in Egypt. So, what can you do? But together, these narratives constitute discourses of delay. And sorry, I lost track of where I am in my deck, but this also, I think, just reinforces some of the things that Banu said. And this is sort of a taxonomy of the kinds of narratives delay. So what can you do? First, I think policymakers and journalists and the public can watch out for some key things. They can look out for false solutions and greenwashing. For example, claims that fossil gas or dirty hydrogen are silver bullets, especially when those narratives use sponsored content, but the sponsorship is not disclosed. Second, we can watch out for state-sponsored influence operations. For example, we've seen some state-sponsored narratives that net zero work is undemocratic. And then finally, we can watch out for narratives around national security and prosperity. And an example of this is that climate action would undermine global efforts to alleviate poverty. And then finally, how can CAD help you? So CAD produces a lot of resources, and members do as well. So the Union of Concerned Scientists, my organization, has what we call the Disinformation Playbook. It tells you the sort of typical steps in a disinformation campaign and helps you figure out what to watch out for. We produce a monthly climate disinfo digest. I suggest that you sign up for that. And then during COP, the run up to COP and during it, we issue a usually daily brief called COP Look and Listen. That is intended for journalists and policymakers and the interested public and is a great way to see what the narratives of the day are. So these are all resources that can be useful. We also provide policy briefs and comments, and these are all available on the CAD website. And finally, here are sort of a long list. The deck's going to be shared, so I'm not going to read this for you, but a list of sort of crucial demands that we have of governments and platforms. Thank you very much for having me today. I'm looking forward to questions.
Thank you very much, Kate, for that excellent presentation. It's a reminder of the challenges we deal with as a part of COP as a process, but also around the broader environmental movement and the misinformation around the key concepts and how we understand the solutions. One of your slides mentioned the issue of technological optimism, and I think we experienced that actively at COP28 with the presence of the private sector and investment opportunities in other areas. And also, this misinformation can sometimes topple governments. I saw firsthand, for instance, the Les Gilets jaunes in France in response to climate policies and related matters. And I think it's important to keep stock and to keep an eye on this and also capitalize on the resources you share. I'd like to give the floor now to our colleague, Dr. Sara Sha'rawi, who is the managing editor of the Arab Media and Society and also head of the Research and Publication Division at Kamal Adham Center for Television and Digital Journalism, American University in Cairo. Dr. Sara, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. And I'd like to also thank my colleagues for their really illuminating presentations. Since my comments are going to be fairly short, I don't have slides today. But I've been asked to sort of give a little bit of a regional perspective on how climate disinformation is impacting the Arab region. I would like to first of all thank my colleague Banu for clarifying the definition of disinformation twice. That's something that is, I think, certainly needed. And thank you also for sharing those resources to both of you. I would be fascinated also to see what happened at COP27, the report on what happened at COP27. So I'm going to sort of separate my presentation into three parts. The first is going to be sort of an example of why this is important. Of course, this is an issue of global concern, but why is this important for the region specifically? Then I'm going to sort of give a list of some of the challenges that are region, again, in some senses generalizable to other regions, but region specific. And then I'm going to sort of go over a few of the reasons for us to have optimism. Again, of course, the Arab region is incredibly diverse, you know, socially, culturally, religiously, socioeconomically, and all of these variables have a really big impact on how disinformation and misinformation impact the public. But we're going to sort of do our best to provide a general picture. So I just want to sort of start off with an example that came up the other day. And I'm not sure how many of the audience members or my fellow panelists saw the unfortunate comments that were made by Tunisia's President Kais Saied relating to the naming of Libya's Storm Daniel. If you haven't heard it, you can just do a quick Google search and find it. So I saw sort of two things happen after these comments were made. The first was that there was snowballing rumors that were sort of changing what was said or attributing it. I mean, it was sort of it was egregious in itself, right? But the narrative of what happened quickly sort of snowballed and changed, as is often the case. And then also it was a quick response from many media outlets, some media outlets in the region, for example, the National and the UAE was also quick to respond. What I didn't see was one thoughtful reflection on sort of what the impact is of politicization and essentially weaponization of a horrible natural disaster in which thousands lost their lives. So the impact that would have and on how ordinary Tunisians perceive these types of events. And then also the second part of that is what this type of commentary means for how adverse climatic events and perhaps even climate change are viewed in parts of the country. And so this is sort of a case study in some of the nuance that is often missing from the discussion, as well as the risk of disinformation, narratives that are not related or not helpful to these events. So moving out to sort of the challenges faced in the region. First of all, there's a historical lack of focus on environmental issues in the media. In the region at large. This is something that's been documented for a number of years. Part of this is economic, depending on what area or what country you're speaking about. But there's also an issue which has been documented, which is the lack of there's an apathy or a lack of interest in so far as a lot of people in a variety of the countries, I'm avoiding saying specific ones at the moment, but there are people who have other priorities, right? In a lot of places in the region, large portions of the population have socioeconomic issues. They're more concerned about regional conflict, domestic conflict, security, including, getting their next meal. The other thing, a third point, is the rumor mill. So COVID-19, and Kate, you also mentioned COVID-19. This was also sort of a masterclass in disinformation and misinformation dissemination, particularly on WhatsApp and other social media platforms. And this is something that also extends, of course, to climate change. Another thing is cultural context. So this also, in the region, there are some attitudes or ideas that create a barrier to the adoption of information. From a scholarly perspective, and this is something that I can speak to from the journal's perspective, Arab Media and Society, is that there are not a lot of people in the region working on climate disinformation or climate change or climate media or environmental media from a scholarly perspective. Increasingly, there is scholarship on climate change in the region. It is a growing field, which is a reason for optimism. But from a media perspective, it is really quite sparse. We are a thematic journal. We publish biannually and bilingually. And we have each issue of our journal is devoted to a specific theme. So in advance of COP27, we had an issue on media and the environment. And I will tell you, of the 7 or 8 years that I've been working on this journal, this was the fewest submissions that we received, because there just simply are not enough people working on these topics. The other point is an issue that I think was sort of brought up by both of my colleagues, which is that there's not enough plurality, and there's the structures of control of how media, particularly sort of the mainstream media, operates in the region, creates a situation where oftentimes the focus is on for example, pledges that have been made by the government, or positive steps by the government, or there's coverage of major negative events or major adverse climate events. But there's not a real effort in terms of contextualizing those things for the public, or providing sort of more information to improve climate literacy or environmental literacy in the region. So of course, this is not possible in all cases, but this is certainly something that sort of writ large requires improvement. So some reasons for optimism in the regional context. One of them is that, as much as, and Kate, it was really, it's very deeply concerning, but unfortunately not surprising, that the disinformation outweighs or outperforms the scientific information. But truly, the fact that there have been not one, but 2 COPs centered in the region, has done something. It's allowed for not just, sort of an initial buzz retraction, but it's allowed for a bit of a sustained presence of the idea in the public conscious. So there has been, I think that has fostered a lot more awareness. Yes, it has also caused, increased disinformation, but I think in general, it has allowed for much more public awareness on these issues. And there's a growing number of courses and trainings that are being made available in the region. This is the case in Egypt. Actually, following COP27, I developed and taught a course on climate communication, which I'm actually joining you from Toronto today. I'm in Toronto for this year, but I believe that that's being taught again in the fall, which is something to feel good about. I will just say though, in teaching that course, it was illuminating for me sort of both the apathy among young people, as well as the extent of the misinformation that particularly younger demographics are receiving from where they get their news, which is social media. So and additionally, my final note is that there are a growing number of conferences and meetings that either in part or in whole, this is one of them, of course, but on a more local level as well, there are increasing numbers of sort of academic or intellectual meetings that are working on these issues. So that's sort of a broad overview of the region. I hope that was clear. And I will just say that you can access, I can maybe throw it in the chat, you can access our issue on media and the environment at arabmediasociety.com, and I will throw it in the chat for you. Thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me to participate.
Of course. Well, thank you very much, Sarah. That was quite enlightening. I'm actually disheartened to know, and I agree with you, that attention, there's a degree of apathy when it comes to this issue, and also to understand how critical the centrality of the climate change agenda is in our region. How much of it is true, how much of it is spin, how much of it is just empty declarations which do not really translate into actions on the ground. So those are very central issues, but I do hope that as a result of those two conferences, events like this one, and your work and other colleagues' work, we'd be able to dig a little bit deeper and be more accountable for delivering on the promises that are being made. I'd like to invite now our colleague Caroline Rigaud. She is an Associate Campaign Director with Purpose. Purpose is a partner on Project Verified with the United Nations Department of Global Communications. Caroline, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for having us here. Thank you for my colleagues for their previous presentations. I'm going to also share my screen because I'm going to share today with you the project that have been developing with the United Nations in the past 3 years. Just a second. Here. Yeah, so as I mentioned, I'm Caroline Rigaud. I'm Associate Campaign Director at Purpose, which is the global creative social impact agency that has been working with the United Nations in this project. So Verified is a communication response model that we developed in partnership with the United Nations.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Caroline, but we can't see your slides. Can you?
Oh, no, for me, it's like view text, stop sharing. Just a second. Share screen. I don't know why it's not sharing content. I don't know why it's not sharing. Can you see my screen now?
I'm afraid not, and your camera is also not working. Maybe our colleague Soraya can share. 1 second. Okay, perhaps for the sake of time, you can start, and then we hopefully once we get the presentation to download, we'll be able to play it.
Yeah, Soraya has my presentation if she would like to share screen, but as we said, I can start. Let me just open here so I can follow up. So as I was mentioning, so we have been developing this project verified with the United Nations for the past 3 years, focus on a communication model where we could tackle mis and disinformation and also bring accurate information to the public. So it's a project that we started working with related to COVID-19 and the pandemic and the uptake of the vaccines, but we understood there was a strong network and infrastructure that we could also tap into other issues such as gender-based violence, children vaccination, and hate speech. The project has already reached over 1 billion people, and we have worked in partnership with more than 200 global partners. So we have worked, this project has already reached an audience in more than 130 countries, and we have developed some in-deep activations in some countries such as Brazil, South Africa, India, Turkey, and others. I will go today with you through some case studies. Unfortunately, you will not be able to see my screen, but we will be able to share afterwards the slides with you. Regarding the verified model, how does it work? So the idea is that the project was designed to be activated and adapted as rapidly as the information gaps and misinformation emerges. And we work with 3 pillars. So the first one is developing communication campaigns that can work with compelling content that rapidly responds to ever-evolving crises. So one example, it's the project that we worked with content informed by behavior science. So the pause campaign, we use the insight that if you can stop emotional response, you can trigger critical thinking. So in this way, we have developed a campaign where we would ask people to pause before sharing so they could question the origin, credibility, and accuracy of the information before sharing it online. Another project that we have developed was in Turkey called Are You OK campaign, where we worked with human stories to cut through the noise and increase public knowledge on mental health. So the idea here was to work with cartoons and radio message to normalize mental health problems in between a Syrian refugee community, to promote the stories of women and make them understand that they can support each other and they can also access health specialists when needed. The second pillar that we hope work is regarding the strong and diverse partnerships that power the distribution at scales. So it's important to mention the social platforms that were also crucial during this project. And one of the projects we did was produce unbranded GIF stickers and memes that could be distributed throughout libraries in WhatsApp, Instagram, TikTok, and many more. We were able to share over 300 million contents throughout several countries. And also, an important pillar of our project is regarding working with trusted messengers, and known as the influencers. And it's important to see which audience you are working with and direct your message through influencers. One highlight that we have is the Team Halo project that we developed was a network of over 100 scientists, clinicians, and researchers that have produced content throughout social media to uptake the confidence on COVID-19 vaccine. And there was a lot of content produced, not only for social media, but also for media mass, working with PR. The third pillar that we have is regarding working with contextual cultural audience insights that can drive highly effective interventions. So one example is the work that we did in South Africa with the Zaukala campaign, where we co-created content with community leaders. We co-created content for young people to motivate them have better pandemic preventive behavior. And this campaign was so successful that it was adopted by the government as a way to talk to the young people throughout the pandemic. And also another example I'd like to highlight is the project that we did around children vaccination in Brazil, where we had a powerful combination of locally respected and nationally renowned specialists, such important scientists during the pandemic and one of the most known doctors in Brazil, with community leaders that work in vulnerabilized communities, and where we did a capacity building for them around children vaccination, and they were able to take this information to the communities. We had an increase of 20% of confidence in children vaccination during that period. And it is important to mention that these are just some case studies that I presented, but Verified has worked with several projects. We always have an ongoing customized evaluation of all those projects, so we can learn and from those projects and maximize our impact. So we not only evaluate the scale, the breadth of our work with numbers and of reach and engagement, but we always do research to analyze it in depth regarding the change of knowledge, attitude, and practice. And finally, just to say, we are really excited that we will be able to take all the lessons learned from this previous project to start now a project also worked focused on combating climate and mis and disinformation, and working with all of you to address information gaps that are delaying climate action. And really excited for this new phase and to be able to work with all of you. You can check out on these case studies and others on our website. It's shareverified.com. Then I can also throw in the chat and afterwards share my presentation with you. Thank you very much. Sorry that the slides and the image did not really work.
No problem. Well, thank you very much, Caroline. And actually, thank you to all our panelists for this engagement. There is a lot of work that needs to be done, and I'm looking at the questions in the chat, which center about the issue of the social behavior and behavioral sciences, and how can we organize our efforts better in order to deal with this bombardment of news and misinformation all over the place. So perhaps to have a quick roundup from our panelists and on the key messages on both the issue of behavioral sciences and what kind of insights do we need to develop to address that issue, but also perhaps touching on the artificial intelligence element, looking at the production of new information as it recycles and reproduces specific messages with agendas or not. So maybe we can go with the same order, starting with Banu to share your reflection on these two issues, and then we'll be able to conclude thereafter. Banu?
Well, thank you very much, Radhan. In fact, it was very enlightening to listen to the fellow panelists, and which actually opened a lot of things. And what we from UNESCO primarily want to argue on this sphere is we are not talking about disinformation as much as we should. So I think if this panel agrees, and perhaps with the involvement of UNRC, perhaps we should take this panel discussion to COP28 as well. And given the fact that this COP28 will be taking stock of what has happened until now, so I think it will provide us with a very good opportunity to say that we have been talking about disinformation for long, what worked and what didn't work. The other thing, as you have very rightly said, the issue of new technology, which can in fact come as a savior for all of us, from the climate change disinformation situation. one thing, that many people tend to forget is, unless we have got access to a set of quality data, we cannot, run our algorithm no matter what. So I think, the first step, that we have to see is whether or not, our data is properly archived, are interoperable between different system, that is used. And quite interestingly, if some of you, who have taken a deeper dive into IPCC data as well, some of the small data, big data is there. In fact, many of the data are sensed using satellite. These are there, but some of the small data which matters to people are somehow are not there. So I think what we will have to do is not only see the aspect that can be addressed using technology, but at the same time we have to see that how can search engine optimization can take place at a local level. How can relevant information can flow to people? How can people start taking care and concern of some of the small rivulet that runs through their village or their community? So some of these small measures are available, and I think we can easily join hand and get them operationalized. So I think as I said earlier, we're looking for countries where our open data guideline can be implemented, and I'm also looking forward to working with all of you during COP28 and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bedr, for that. We will probably take you up on that offer. I think we'll need to do something specific. Okay.
I really appreciated the other panelists' presentations, and I think thinking about the trusted messenger piece that Carolyn talked about is crucial here. You have to find a place of trust and shared value before you can connect effectively with someone who's inclined to accept climate change denial. Okay, and so I want to lift up that work that Purpose are doing. I think it's tremendously effective, and there's lessons for all of us. So I think we need a systemic change at the problem. We need to regulate the platforms, and so that they don't allow the velocity and spread of disinformation. And then I think all of us as humans need to connect with other humans.
Thank you, Kate. There will be another argument about regulation and its role, maybe some other time. But that's definitely one endeavor. Perhaps we can move to Sarah, then Caroline.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Yeah, thank you again to all the panelists. It's been a really illuminating day. I couldn't agree more that we need to have more discussion and transparency and awareness around climate disinformation on both a higher, on sort of a higher and a more localized level. My question is, I mean, you have all shared a lot of really valuable resources. I know that some of the UN resources are available in other languages or available in Arabic, but I'm wondering about sort of taking initiatives to promote more translation of materials. Banner, you spoke about the importance of reaching people on a local level. So I think making the effort to ensure that these materials are available in local languages is a really important step that needs to be taken as well towards climate literacy and combating climate disinformation. Thank you very much again.
Thank you, Sarah. I think that's a valid point, and Dano, feel free to take the floor if you have any additional things to add. Or we can move to Caroline. Caroline, you have the last word?
Yeah, I got it. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to reinforce I think the importance of finding innovative and creative ways to bring this information, as Kate said, the importance of working with trusted messengers to co-create with them and to take into account every aspect of each country so we can make content that is really culturally relevant. And the importance of working with partners and having really good partnerships as we have with the United Nations that brings credibility to the project, so we can work together, because this will really be a strong collective effort to tackle through this challenge at the moment. Yeah, thank you.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, Caroline, for all your work on Project Verified and other endeavors. It's going to be quite a battle until we come over this, and every COP we see a huge mess of misinformation actually coming around that associated with the different interests and pressure groups and whatnot. But we have to focus on the science. We have to be critical about the information we have, and we have to follow the principles that were shared with us today as we try to make informed decisions and actions toward addressing climate. Thank you for our colleagues and speakers for participating in this session and all the attendees. And I hope to see you next week in our next webinar, same time, same place. It's going to discuss the topic of climate diplomacy, which will be an interesting discussion with a few colleagues on how the negotiations happen in that front. Thank you all. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.